Hello to all my DIY mechanics. In this video I will be discussing the symptoms of defective subframe bushings on your Saab 9.5, explaining the differences of the options available for replacement and everything you need to know before purchasing and installing the new bushings to save you a lot of time, money and frustration, before showing you in the next video how to replace them even without a lift or major disassembly work. The subframe bushings are the connection between the subframe and the main frame of the vehicle. As the engine, transmission and suspension are mounted on the subframe bushings must absorb and isolate vibrations, shocks and forces that occur when the vehicle is stationary or traveling. The mounts are made of an elastic material such as rubber or polyurethane, which flexibility enables the mounts to adapt to the different loads and at the same time fulfill a damping function. This is no easy task. The bushings are under constant stress, so it's no wonder that after several 100,000 kilometers they no longer have the same properties as when they were new. In the Saab 9.5, however, the subframe bushings are particularly fragile. After 200,000 kilometers you can be sure that you will need at least 2 new subframe bushings. The subframe has a total of 6 bushings, although the rear 2 are exposed to higher loads and therefore break more quickly than the 2 center ones or the 2 front ones. The symptoms are more diverse than you might think. I was surprised how many small inconveniences were eliminated after the replacement. A clear indication of defective subframe bushings is an audible and perceivable vibration or metal-to-metal knocking when stationary, at low engine speeds, when clutching, starting, changing gear and when switching off the engine. At that point the bushings are completely shot. Let's have a listen. With an automatic transmission you can feel a strong jerk when changing gear, for example from park to reverse, neutral or drive. An unpleasant vibration when stationary when drive is engaged, and also a sometimes rough shifting process, as well as a distinct jerk when changing gear. With both types of transmission, defective subframe bushings can affect the steering characteristics, as the wheels are also suspended from the subframe, and the steering becomes more indirect and spongy. Consequently, if the track is no longer held properly, this also affects the tires, which then rub off significantly on the flanks. These were the effects of how you can recognize defective subframe bushings when driving. If you jack up the car and look at the bushings or the mobility of the subframe from underneath, you can of course also clearly recognize defective bushings. Even if the bushings are compensating for vibrations and forces, it should not be possible to move or shift the subframe by hand. Here you can clearly see that I can move the subframe up and down with just one hand, and this is a clear sign that the subframe bushings are completely worn out. It becomes even clearer when I unscrew the screw. The inside of the bushing is completely loose. I can move it back and forth with one finger, completely shut. Here I have a direct comparison. This bearing, for example, is completely worn out. The inner part has separated entirely from the outer part. It's not quite as bad here, but you can clearly see that there is too much play and also cracks in the rubber. And this is a new bearing. You can hardly move the inner part, if at all. Before you start the repair and replace all 6 subframe bushings, take the time to check all 6 thoroughly. As already mentioned, the rear ones, so those in the center of the vehicle, are subjected to the most stress and are therefore most likely to be worn on your Saab as well. You can check whether the center and the front ones need to be replaced by checking whether the subframe has play at the bushings or whether the inner part of the bushing has play. I only replaced the rear 2 bushings on my 185 horsepower Arc and found the other 4 to be okay. On my 260 horsepower Aero, all 6 were completely gone. I assume that the higher power puts more strain on the bushings. Both have a mileage of just under 250,000 kilometers. Now that you know whether and which of your subframe bushings are worn and need to be replaced, it's time to find replacements. As already mentioned, there are different materials used for subframe bushings. The original ones are made of rubber. However, these have to be pressed into the subframe, which is not possible for a DIY repair without special tools and a great deal of effort. Then there are polyurethane bushings. I'm going to install these because you don't have to press them in. I can't comment on their durability yet, I haven't driven enough after the repair. My main argument was the ease of installation. Another important piece of information: there are differences between the subframe bushings used depending on the year of manufacture. What I have found out in various forums and through my own experience, before 2001 and after 2006, it seems that 6 identical bushings are fitted. In the years between, the center ones differ from the front and the rear ones. Firstly, they do not have a metal ring on the outside, but a plastic housing. Secondly, they have an outer diameter of 40 mm and not 38 like the other 4. This means that if you order some spare parts, whether polyurethane or original rubber bushings, you must pay attention to which you need and order. There are various manufacturers for polyurethane bushings. Powerflex, for example, offers subframe bushings with the 2 different diameters, but they are also quite expensive. And I didn't know about the different diameters when I ordered the parts, so I chose a cheaper manufacturer and ordered them from Scandix. These bearings, however, have all a diameter of 38 mm, which means that the 2 center ones had play. To avoid having to buy a new set, I designed a kind of adapter and printed it with my 3D printer, which compensated for the 2 mm. It felt quite good when I fitted it, and so far I haven't noticed anything negative. Unfortunately, I can't say how long the solution will last, as I haven't driven enough. Everyone has to decide for themselves which way to go, the professional and more expensive one, or the slightly botched but cheaper one. And if you're interested in such adapters, just write me. Another thing that could cause confusion when buying new bushings: these polyurethane bushings are available halved. This is great as it makes installation much easier. But if you buy them not in halves, like me, that's not a problem either. I simply sawed mine in half. Of course, remove the metal sleeve in the center first. It remains intact and is then pushed into the bushing at the end. So please don't spend more money just for the halved ones. A handsaw and a metal blade will do the job perfectly. However, if you have a bench vise or something to clamp it in, it's easier. Yeah, well, I think that's all you need to know to figure out which of your subframe bushings need to be replaced and which ones to buy. I hope this video was helpful for you and you are now confident to tackle your worn out subframe bushings. I would really appreciate a like, a comment and a subscription, and be sure to watch my next video where I show you exactly how to replace the subframe bushings, and believe me, it's worth it. You'll think you're driving a new car. See you right away for the repair.